You're listening to the Joel Martin Mastery Podcast, your source of music news, stories, and 2-hour deep dive interviews with bands that have sold over 150 million albums. If you've been enjoying the podcast, please take a moment to subscribe, like, comment, and share. Now let's dive in to today's episode. Welcome to the Joel Martin Mastery Podcast. Thank you for joining us. We really appreciate it. We are joined by a very special guest. He's achieved a level of mastery as a guitarist, bassist, and keyboard player for the Juno Award-winning band Crownlands. So welcome to the podcast, Kevin Comeau. Kevin, how are you? And is it true that you have a piece of gear that's out right now with Rush's Geddy Lee?
Yes, yeah. So it's great to see you, man. Thanks for having me. And yeah, I've been lucky enough. I've helped out the fellows in Rush on a couple of their projects, and they've helped me out. In fact, like I have one of Geddy Lee's Taurus pedals that I use in the studio. So a lot of time, when you're on the road, your gear is siphoned off somewhere else when you're in the studio. So a lot of Fearless, actually, the Taurus pedals that you hear are not mine; they're Geddy's, and they've been in the middle of rehearsing for the new R50 something tour, and I've become really close with Scully, who's Geddy's tech. And we met Scully a few years ago at the charity gig we did with Alex Lifeson. And so Scully was helping Al at that point. And, we really connected. And Scully lives in Port Perry. I live in Uxbridge. So we're basically like neighbors. And so, we've gotten really close over the years. And in fact, Scully ended up helping us for a number of years while he would be out with, Jeff Beck. And, during his time off, he would help tech for us for any of our tours. And, as it goes, you just keep talking. So like I was, messaging Scully about, like, how's the rehearsals going? And there was just this one specific issue because of the way that Geddy's new rig has been modified because Lauren Gold is playing keyboards. Geddy doesn't have access to the same systems of triggering certain samples on a few of their songs anymore. And so everyone was kind of racking their brains, so like Geddy's team of geniuses has been Scully, who's, has been teching for him for years on the bass side. And then there's Jack Secret, as a lot of folks know, or, has been his keyboard tech on the road for a long time. And then there's Jim Burgess, who used to be with Saved by Technology. And he's the one who helped them figure out all of like the ways to trigger samples back in the day, right? So on, Power Windows onward, when they had to figure out using EMU emulators or the Akai S900s, and then what was it, the S1000s they used for a while, and then they switched to the Roland XV5080s, and now finally they are on an Ableton rig, right? They're on an Ableton system, and basically they're just they needed to have like a few different foot switches to trigger a few different things, and I had recently picked up something called a Morningstar MC8, and it's essentially a blank canvas. It's got 4 foot switches, then each foot switch can send up to 16 MIDI messages over 16 different MIDI channels at any given time, all at once, right? And so I have been blown away by how much it's easier it's made my life, and anyone who's listened to Crownlands knows that we borrow heavily inspiration-wise from Rush, right? And so when I was a kid, I'd watch Geddy Lee do exactly what I wanted to do, where a man's playing bass, guitar, keyboards, triggering samples, and a lot of what he was able to do was because of the genius of guys like Jim Burgess and Jack Secret. And so it was this really cool full circle moment where these guys had this specific problem for triggering a couple songs. I'm not going to say what the songs are because I don't know when this is coming out, and I don't want to spoil any of the songs, but the songs that they needed to trigger these specific samples on are some of my favorite songs ever, like ever, ever, ever. And so to be able to program it, because like, I was going back and forth, like it was kind of like broken telephone for a couple of weeks, where it's like, okay, we need to figure out to just send this note over this channel at this time, with this foot switch. I'm like, okay, I can figure that out. And so I programmed everything in this little box, and we brought it to the rehearsal, and it worked. It worked perfectly, and it was great. So it was really great, and then of course I got to sit in for the rehearsals and see my heroes play some of my favorite songs, and them being able to play it the way they want to because of my help is just one of those like it's the best thing ever when you get to help your heroes action their music that that inspired me. So that's a really cool moment. And Getty and Alex are such sweet guys where they were I think they were happy to receive that little bit of help. And
I saw Rush on their last tour, the Clockwork Angels tour,
yep.
and man, you close your eyes and you listen, and you can hear like 12 musicians on stage, and then you open your eyes and there's three of them, and you're like, how is this humanly possible?
Yeah. Oh, it's amazing, man. Well, again, it's a circus act, right? Like they said they wanted to be the world's smallest orchestra, and they definitely achieved that. And that's kind of that's why we're trying to figure out a way to do it with two people to varying degrees of success.
Back in 2011, I worked on a charity event with Alex and Getty, and they were able to raise $140,000 in one day for charity, which is amazing. And like you mentioned, how nice they are. I was there with a bunch of volunteers, and Rush comes in and there's all the people that they know, like record label people, music industry people. They walked right by them and walked right up to the volunteers. Hey, thank you so much for helping out. We couldn't do this event without you. It was like all about the volunteers, all about the fans first, and then they went and they hung out with the people that they knew. And afterwards, they sent me in the mail a thank you card, like a custom Rush thank you card, handwritten and everything that I still have up on my fridge. They gave us all t-shirts, so I can attest to just how nice these guys are. And I don't know if that's a Canadian thing, but I like to think it is.
Yeah, they're just class acts, man. They really are. There's a reason why they're so revered, and it's not just the music, it's just how they carry themselves as people, man.
I have a funny segue here. So you mentioned to me that one of your passions is motorcycles and that you ride a Triumph Bonneville. And my very next guest on Friday is Triumph. I have Triumph drummer Gilmore. So that's a random segue from Triumph to Triumph.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, the other great Canadian power trio.
Yeah, and it's so cool that they're back touring. I just saw them with April Wine here at the Canadian Tire Center in Ottawa a few weeks ago. So I like to start these interviews by sharing with the listeners how the guests and I know each other or how we ended up here today doing this interview. In our case, over the last few years, I've done 4 hours worth of interviews with David Bottrell, three-time Grammy award-winning producer. This guy's worked with Tool, with all these different bands, Stained and Godsmack. And when I was preparing for that interview, I actually listened to the Crownlands discography to be prepared because he had worked on a bunch of different stuff with you guys. So that's how I became aware of you. And I loved what I heard. I'm a big Rush fan, like you mentioned, and I thought, wow, this is like something new that is inspired by that, but kind of forging its own path forward. So I went out and I saw you guys play at the NAC in Ottawa with July Talk on April 10th,
Oh,
2023. And I have a picture that I want to share here.
oh yeah, there you are, man.
So this is the show, the NAC July Talk, April 10th, 2023. This is 3 years ago. Do you have any memories of this show? The NAC is such an incredible venue here in Ottawa.
I mean, that's yeah, that was an amazing night. NAC is one of my favorite rooms to play ever. I love Ottawa for many reasons. I have just so many memories. Like my sister lives there. She studied at university there for 9 years because she has her master's there. But the NEC is one of the most beautiful rooms in the country, dude.
I feel like it's our Massey Hall, like our equivalent to Massey Hall. Just a high
Definitely.
class, great sounding venue. You got the whole balcony, you got people below and above.
I would argue it sounds better than Massey, and the load-in is a heck of a lot better than Massey. But yeah, like it's just a gorgeous, gorgeous room. The hands there are amazing, right? All like the local staff, fantastic people. It's always a highlight to go there. Again, going back to Rush, one of my favorite things about the NAC is they have a giant, like I'm talking maybe like a 40-foot Starman, like backstage on stage right. And every time we go there, it feels like we're coming home because of that. It's great. We did the Governor General Awards there at the NAC last year, and that was honoring Bob Ezrin, who's one of my all-time favorite producers, right? He did
He did Dark Side of the Moon, didn't he? Not Dark
No,
Side, The Wall, I believe.
yeah, he did The Wall. He did Momentary Lapse of Reason with Floyd. He did Peter Gabriel's first solo record. God, what else? He discovered Alice Cooper, and produced like most of Alice Cooper stuff. He produced Kiss's Destroyer. So it's like anytime there's a 70s rock album with giant like schmaltzy strings and like big orchestral elements, and like if you're hearing rock and roll and a French horn shows up, it's been produced by Bob Ezrin because he's like a genius arranger as well. And so it was a really cool experience for us to go there and honor him as well. And we played like Another Brick in the Wall and School's Out. It was this really fun thing. But we played with a symphony orchestra, with the Ottawa Orchestra, and a couple of them like walked out during the rehearsals. They're like, "It's too loud. I can't do this." And I just thought that was so funny. Or
They weren't rock
um,
and roll enough.
they weren't rock and roll enough. But I just couldn't imagine, like like a rock artist like walking out of a thing, be like, "Oh, it's too quiet. I can't do this." Be like, "Well, you're never going to be invited back to do anything cool, dude. What are you talking about?" But I digress. Yeah, NAC is one of my favorite venues, man, and it was great to meet you that night as well with July Talk. That was an amazing run. That was when we released Fearless. Like that was maybe the day after that record came out.
So I look at this picture, and the last thing before I take it down is, man, if you guys don't receive a sponsorship from like a shampoo and conditioner company or from like a beard product company, it's a great injustice in this world.
Well, yeah, we haven't received any. Maybe we need to start our own. Maybe that's the answer.
There's probably more money in starting your own, I think. So we're going to do a full 2 hour deep dive interview here. We're going to cover your life, your career, your discography. There's so much to get to. You have a brand new album coming out in the next 48 hours of this interview. By the time the interview comes out, the album will already be out that the listeners can go and listen to it right away, which is awesome. So lots to get to. I want to get started all the way back at the beginning. Where does this love of music come from? Is there maybe some earliest musical memories that stand out to you?
Great question. I think like the first artist that I heard that like really captured my imagination, like one of my first obsessions, um, was Elvis. And that was just from being exposed to Lilo and Stitch. Like, I don't know if you remember that movie. Beautiful, beautiful Disney movie. I think one of my favorites ever. Um, I'm trying to think when that came out. I would have been like maybe like 7 or 8, when that came out, I want to say. Um, and yeah, like Elvis just, really captured my imagination. And um, my folks, for my birthday one year, they bought me, or my uncle gave me the like Elvis's greatest hits, and they took me to, um, how old was I? Was it like 9 or 10? On my birthday, they took me to an Elvis impersonator concert, and it just like, blew me away. I was just like, it was one of my first live music experiences. And then Hawaiian Elvis, who was always my favorite Elvis, because like Suspicious Minds was my favorite song. That just really hit me. And he invited me on stage and sang happy birthday to me. And I'm just like this starstruck little kid. I'm like, this is awesome. And then he's like, okay, you need to get off the stage now. But I'm just like, no, this is
You're acting like it's real Elvis, which is
really,
awesome.
I really like being on the stage actually. And so I think that was maybe one of my first experiences of being like, oh, this might be the thing for me. And then, like most kids, I remember being blown away by Michael Jackson's music videos, especially Thriller, because, I was really into a lot of horror movies at that time because, as a kid, you get exposed to like, Terminator and Alien and Jaws and like that visceral feeling. And I remember really being into American Werewolf in London, by John Landis. And then, of course, John Landis directed the Thriller music video. And I remember really being like, scared out of my wits by that video, but also just really being inspired by the music. And, that was before I started playing music, though. My dad he still is a fantastic fingerstyle acoustic guitar player. And it was always really inspiring just seeing him play that kind of music. He tried to teach me a couple times, but it's just like I couldn't. I don't know, just my hands were too little for the guitar at that time. And then the first band that really inspired me to pick up an instrument and play though was Green Day. And I remember, so this would have been right when I was 11, 12. Oh, that would have been 11 years old when I started playing the bass. So that was when I first heard Holiday by Green Day on the radio.
So this is the American Idiot album.
Yeah. Yeah, and just the bridge, man. The Holiday bridge where it just breaks down into the bass guitar. And I was just blown away by the timbre of that instrument. I'd never really registered what a bass was. And I was like, whoa, this hits me in my gut. I love this. And so later that year for Christmas, my parents took me to Long McQuaid, and I got to go to the bass room, and I got to pick up, a Squire Bronco bass, which is a really short scale little bass. And it's like, yep, this fits great. And so the agreement with my folks was I would learn how to read music as well. And so they bought me the Hal Leonard bass book that I still have probably somewhere in my folks' basement. And so the first day I picked up the bass, my dad taught me how to play All Along the Watchtower on bass, which is great because it's three chords, easy. And then I learned how to read Three Blind Mice, like classic, right? And something that really took me by surprise was like, oh wait a second, it's actually like kind of the same chord progression, like da 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 da. You're actually going like it's basically the same difference between those frets. And I was really like intrigued by the fact that it's like, oh, they're different notes, but it's the same distance between the notes to create those two chord progressions. And it just kind of, got those wheels turning of so much of music is not what you play, but how you play it. And that just kind of set me off on the journey big time. Because like up at that point, like my biggest dream was I really wanted to become an airline pilot. And my parents were generous enough. I started taking flight lessons. And so my goal was I was going to try and get my private pilot's license and join the Air Cadets. And
Where did that interest come from? The flying.
I don't know. I think there was like around that same time at the Oshawa airport, there was like a intro to flying, like a free thing for like kids could sign up to like go up in a little Cessna 150. And my sister and her friend had actually signed up to do it. I think it was something with like the Girl Guides or the Girl Scouts or something at that time because I think it was her and all of those, all of that group went. And of course I went just to like hang out. And my sister just had a moment where she like was too afraid to get on the plane. I think she went into the plane and was like, "Uh-oh, no, this isn't for me," right? And ran out. And I was like, "Well, I'll do it." And then I just remember being really, really blown away by the experience of being up in the plane. And that just kind of sparked this kind of passion and this sort of obsession. But once I started playing music, though, that kind of faded away, and pretty much every other, like anything, right? Like I think a lot of people who go into music like have other interests, and then all of a sudden, you pick up the guitar or the bass, and you're like, oh no, this is the thing. This actually makes me want to, really kind of like zoom in and figure everything there is to know about it. So.
I have a funny story about Lilo and Stitch. So a friend of mine, him and I went as teenagers. We went to the movies and we're badass. We're going to go see Fast and Furious, whatever the new one was. And we go and at the last minute it's sold out and we look and the only other movie available was Lilo and Stitch. So it's my badass friend and we went and we saw Lilo and Stitch. And it was like, if you tell anyone that we saw this, you're dead. And then
Oh,
and then it ends up being amazing. And it's like, don't tell anyone I enjoyed this.
it's a beautiful movie, dude. It's so funny. It's so heartwarming. And I don't know, man. I think as an adult, I cry every time I watch that movie, man. Like when he's lost in the woods and he's reading the Ugly Duckling book. I mean, oh, come on. It kills me. It's the guy who made Lilo and Stitch. He also made a movie called The Wild Robot. I don't know if you've seen that,
I've
but
read the book as well. I love that
oh,
movie.
it's just gorgeous, man. I mean, visually beautiful, emotionally, just really yeah. The guy knows how to get you right in your, right in your heartstrings, man.
I just did an interview with Evanescence co-founder Ben Moody, and his
Yeah.
earliest memory as well was also Thriller, saying he saw that
Oh,
movie and he became obsessed with zombies from that to the
yeah.
point where later on, when they got super successful with Evanescence, he plays a zombie in Resident Evil Apocalypse to show him like holding on to that dream of, and that obsession of zombies.
That's sick. That's awesome. Yeah, like see this. You never know, right? If something just grabs you when you're a kid, it usually stays with you for the rest of your life.
When we scheduled this interview, I put out the bat signal to the Crownlands fans to take in fan questions. So I'm going to sprinkle them throughout the interview. And I have the first one here. You kind of answered it a little bit, but this is from Bored Shirtless. And the question is, what's the first instrument you learned to play? And do you ever plan to sing lead on a song?
Bass is my first instrument, my first love, and I already have sang lead on a Crownlands song. On our first EP, Mantra, there's a song called Scott Fitzgerald, and that's me singing lead. So
There you go. A deep cut that the fan was not aware of. So it's already
there,
checked off the list.
yeah, it's done. It's done.
When did you start playing the other instruments? So you tried to play guitar, a little difficult with tiny
Yeah,
hands. You pick
yeah.
up the bass. Where does the keys come in? Singing, songwriting?
And so the keyboards came. I mean, the guitar is a tricky one where it's like I don't think I really started playing it seriously until I was around 16 or 17. And I'd probably say the keyboards came right around there as well. So when I was 14 was the first time I heard Rush. And I got into them because as a bass player, you just keep wanting to find like what music has the best bass parts on it, right? And so as much as I love Green Day, like, Mike Dirnt's fantastic bass player and inspired me big time. But then I found myself getting more into classic rock, like, The Who, like John Entwistle was one of my big time faves at that point, and Les Claypool was another huge inspiration. And so it was like one of those intersections where like Geddy Lee is kind of like the halfway point between John Entwistle and Les Claypool, right? Because Entwistle inspired Geddy went and inspired Les. And so I got big time into Rush, and the first record I heard of theirs was A Farewell to Kings, and that's the first record that starts to heavily feature keyboards for that band. And all those mini Moog textures. I've got like my mini Moog right here next to me, actually, which is, that's another one of my all-time favorite instruments. So keyboards was kind of the next thing I dove really deep into, and I started taking. There was a piano course you could take in high school, and so I started taking that. And my teacher, Susan Selby, she was an amazing music teacher, huge, huge help for me, and she actually lent me a Roland JV35 digital synthesizer just so I could practice my scales at home, right? Because I didn't have a full size piano at home. And so she lent me that. And the thing is, though, that keyboard actually has a like a synthesizer section where it's got a filter and an envelope shaper. So instead of practicing my scales, I mean, I did practice my scales, but instead of doing that, I was just like messing around with it and trying to like figure out how I could recreate the camera eye sample and hold synth effect on it. And once I did, I was like, oh, I've unlocked the universe. This is so fun. And so I would spend like so much time, figuring that out. And although actually, what am I even saying? Before then, I was playing drums. Actually, my cousin lent me his drum kit, like an old Pearl Export series drum kit, and that would have been, I think, when I was like 15 or 6. Yeah, it's no, again, it's all kind of around the same time, right? I started playing bass at 11, got more into guitar around 16. I got my drum kit, my keyboard around that time too. But the first band that I actually played in was a band called Braden and the Happy Campers, and we would rehearse. And my sister had just went to university, and so I took over her bedroom, which was like this Beauty and the Beast themed bedroom, right, with like the borders, and it was, bright pink. And so there's nothing cooler than that for, 15-year-old boy to sit there with his friends and trying to play psychedelic rock. But we started playing just Cream covers, right? So there was Braden on guitar, my buddy Will on bass, and myself on drums. And so that was the first band I actually played in. So I was playing drums in that band. And we would just use like a USB microphone hooked into my uncle's old laptop running Windows Movie Maker. And that was how we made our first recordings. And we thought we're like, oh, this is it. We've made our first album in like a week. And it sounded terrible, Joel. It sounded awful, but we were doing it. That was when our interest started of like, writing music, recording music. And it was great because now I didn't have to go anywhere. Everyone would come to my house because I had the drum kit. And once you have the drum kit, like that's it, right? But I was not a very good drummer, and I'm still not a very good drummer. But ironically, the first instrument I played actually in a band was drums. And then that band didn't last very long, and right around then is when my high school teacher gave me a keyboard. And so of course then the next band that I started was keyboards because it's like those are the kind of the two instruments that like most people don't play in high school, right? It's a guitar player is a dime a dozen and a bass player, unfortunately, I hate to say this, often is just a failed guitar player, right? It's how did Paul McCartney play bass? He was the least talented guitar player in the band at the time, so he was forced to play the bass. I can make that joke because bass was my favorite instrument. But I focused more on drums and keyboards because I knew I would be busier. I'd have an easier time finding other bandmates. And so the next band I made was called Quantum Odyssey. And on this one, I played keyboards on it. And it was just, like we were already writing like 10, 15-minute instrumental songs about outer space. So nothing has changed from 16 to 32. I'm still doing exactly the same thing. Just
Just so ambitious from an early age.
yeah, I mean, yeah, exactly. You just, that's why I know like 14-year-old Kevin would still be like, right on, man, you're fighting the good fight. And that's kind of what you have to do is you got to make sure like you're honoring what your teenage self would want to see.
I wanted to kick off this interview powerfully, so I reached out and got a little bit of help from a fellow bass player. This is the bass player for a platinum selling band. This is Dave Benedict from Default, as well as the new supergroup Wrecking Room, which has members of Finger Eleven and
Oh,
My Darkest Days and Rockstar Supernova. So Dave says this will be a good one. Kevin is a great dude. I've met him twice. He was super kind and sweet when Default played a show with them. How can you not admire a dude that can play multi instruments and look so damn cool doing it? The only thing I don't like about Crown Lands is how bad they make the rest of us look. They really are a massive jewel in the Canadian rock and roll crown. That's from Dave Benedict, Default.
wow. That means so much. Like, that's so nice, man. Wow, that means a lot. Yeah, we played with Default a couple times. I think last time was up in Timmins, I think. Like again, playing in Canada, man. Like, where are you gonna play? Gonna go, you gotta go up to Timmins. And that was actually a really, really good festival though. It was a really good time. So that means a lot. Wow, what a great guy.
We're going to dive into your career with Crown Lands. Before we do that, you mentioned to me that you have a story about hitchhiking that takes you from Canada to the US. You
Yep.
perform with a band there, and then once you come back, the Crown Lands story gets started. Can you share that hitchhiker story?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, so I went to the University of Western Ontario in London for music, and the reason I went there was again like my high school music teacher Susan Selby. She went there, and so I wanted to kind of follow in her footsteps and go there and get my music degree. I eventually wanted to get my teaching degree, and but I just kind of had this existential moment. I was 19. I was reading way too much Jack Kerouac at the time, or maybe just the right amount. And I really felt the strong urge to see as much of the world before I went back to complete my studies. So I bought just a backpack. I filled it up with, a couple changes of clothes and a harmonica. And I hitchhiked across Canada. And that took me a few weeks. I actually ended up finding there's a guy who needed help like towing a trailer. And I'd never towed a trailer. And, he's I'm like, I can help. And he's like, all right, cool. So like I ended up, driving most of the way across Canada with this guy, and it was a really good time. And I learned how to, haul a big trailer and keep it straight on the road. Luckily, most of the roads in Canada, on the prairies, it's all just straightaways, easy stuff. Going up through the mountains, it's a different story, but whatever. And so then I made it to Vancouver. I spent a few days there, and then I hitchhiked down from Vancouver through, Seattle, Oregon, all the way down to LA. So that took me, I don't know, like again, just shy of a month again, like a few weeks. And basically, I would just like, if I couldn't find a ride, I just keep walking down the highway. I went down the coast, like the 101, and then eventually the one. And I would just, walk until I couldn't. And then I had like a tarp and a sleeping bag in my backpack. And I just, walk into the woods by the side of the road, pitch up the cowboy camping setup and just sleep and wake up and do it all again. And I met so many interesting characters along the way. Some very interesting people. Like I kept a journal along the way, and like I definitely want to publish it one day because like looking back on it, like I don't know what I was thinking. Like I mean, I was so convinced of the good in the world, and I'm very lucky that none of the encounters I had were too dangerous. I'm
You
very
didn't end
very.
up in a true crime podcast.
There were a couple times I thought I would, but I got out of it all good. There were a couple of interesting moments, as it goes in in any adventure like that. But anyways, so like the day I got to LA, I went into the Sam Ash music store there, and I wanted to try out a Rickenbacker bass because I'd never played a Rickenbacker. And when I went to the bass aisle, there was these really cool Rasta dudes hanging out playing the bass, and I was like, hey guys, like, do you mind if I try it? And they're like, sure. And I'm playing the bass, and they're like, oh, and, you play pretty good for a white boy. I'm like, oh, well, thank you so much. And we're chatting, and they're like, they had mentioned they were playing a show that night at forget the venue, but it was like this little dive bar in North Hollywood. And I was like, you guys need a keyboard player? And they're like, we don't have a keyboard player, but we have a keyboard. We'll bring it. You can sit in and jam with us. And I was like, great, So like they did some Bob Marley tunes and a bunch of originals. I think that we did like a couple Jimi Hendrix songs, and I would just sit and comp on the keys, right? And I could follow along well enough. And I sat in, and they seemed to enjoy it. And then I went to their apartment the next day. We jammed more, and I just started kind of crashing on their couch. And then eventually, I joined the band, and we played the Whiskey a Go Go a couple times. We did all of these other gigs around. We did the House of Blues. It was a really good time. And they kind of had like a bit of a studio setup in the living room of the apartment, and yeah, it was just an amazing, amazing time where being 19 years old and just absorbing all of this music, like it felt like I think I learned more in that 6 months playing in that band than I did while I was in school. And my goal was, just to go back to California after after 6 months as a Canadian, you can only be in the US for up to 6 months until you become an illegal alien. And I didn't really want to do that. And so I ended up hitchhiking back up to Canada, but now at this time it's like late December. And me
It's
being
not the same, right, as
I
when
didn't
it was hot.
I'm like, it's California. How cold can it be? It's like the land of eternal summer because like I'm in LA in December wearing a sweater, but I'm walking around in flip-flops still. I'm like, this is great. How bad can it be? And then it can get really cold, dude. It can get real cold real fast. And so going down, I was like this kid on an adventure. Going up, I was like, oh, this is how desperation truly feels. I'm hurting. But anyways, I did make it back up to Vancouver, and then I convinced my parents to help me out with a one-way flight from Vancouver to Toronto because I'm like, don't you guys want to see me for Christmas? If you guys want to see me for Christmas, maybe help me out with a flight, And
They're just
they
happy
were
you're alive at this point.
I think yeah, they were gracious enough to help me out with the flight. I mean, at that point, this is long before the fuel crisis, so I think it was a cheap couple $100 flight, luckily. And so, I went and saw my folks for the holidays, but the night I got home, they went to sleep, so I went to my friend's house for a party, and this was the guitar player in that second band I played in high school, and my buddy John was like, hey, what are you doing tomorrow? I'm auditioning for this band. They're coming over to my place. We're gonna jam. I hear the drummer's a big Rush fan. You should come and hang if you want. I was like, don't mind if I do. And so I kind of crashed this audition the next day, and that was where I met Cody because Cody was playing in this band called Heavy Earth with Dylan, and Dylan was playing bass in this band, and John was trying to become the new guitar player, and it just kind of felt like everything lined up just the way it did because when Cody and I met, it just felt like like an instant connection and instant camaraderie. And we're still doing it. So
Some might call that serendipity. The timing was perfect.
some might, yeah, it was the timing is pretty wild.
And Cody also went to school for music?
Yeah, Cody studied psychology at York for a number of years, and for a couple of years at the end, they were taking some drumming courses there as well. Yeah.
You hear rumors about the start of a band. I hear that you guys would jam in a barn. Is this true or is this fake news?
No, yeah, that's true. So, well, it's there's this character in North Oshawa, and her name is Banjo Sally, and she had a barn.
Excellent name.
She's the best. Actually, I took banjo lessons from her for a while as well. She's a ripping player, unbelievable, and a lovely human. And so she had a barn at the back of her property that Sandra Fox actually was renting as her studio. And Sandra helped the band that we were in before. She helped us record some music. And basically Sandra was like, "Hey, if you come in and play drums and program drum machines for this project, you can use it on a couple of the days that I won't be here for whatever music you want to make." And I'm like, "Perfect, thank you." And so we had this deal. So like I was playing in her band, and I think we were rehearsing every Sunday, and we were working on that. Then what was it, like Tuesdays or something? Every Monday or Tuesday, like I would just go and work on my own music. And at that time, I was writing a lot of the riffs that would eventually become that first Crownlands record. And I invited Cody up to the bar and I was like, "Hey, dude, yeah, check this out." Cody was very receptive to it, and we wrote that first EP together in like a day. It just came together so easily and it flowed so well. And we recorded some terrible demos on like my old I had this like standalone like hard disk recorder, like this Zoom recorder with like terrible built-in effects, but that was how we recorded, a lot of that music. And then we met our friend Justin Melly. Like he was this amazing musician, but he had just got his degree at what school? Was it Fanshawe? And so he's like, "Hey, like I can kind of help engineer produce this." And so we got him to help produce that record as well. And then we quickly went to touring it, as quick as we could. But so yes, we were jamming in that barn for like the first year of that band.
And what was the music scene like back in 2015 when you first started?
We were jamming a lot. Like I was hosting an open mic at a place called the Atria, which is a very, very rough dive bar in Oshawa. Really, it's like really heavy drug scene, a lot of fights, like seen people like literally just like punch through like the front window. I've seen people like throw chairs on stage. I've seen so many fights break out. I've seen like it's a rough, rough place, but like we were again like 20, 21 at this point, and we were like innocent children, so we didn't really see it as bad as it actually was. But it was a good time. I mean, in Oshawa, the music scene's always skewed a lot heavier, and so for we didn't really fit in. And at that time, like most of the bands that we were playing shows with, doing the classic 4 or 5 band bills, and a lot of it was like metalcore and grindcore. A lot of the cores were big at that point. And we didn't really fit, but it was still a decent enough community. But the biggest boon for us at that time was because we were so young, there was a place called Wasted Space, which was this little art cafe like a block away from the Atria. And in the back of this cafe, there was like basically like a closet that had a PA in it, and you could fit maybe like 40 people in it. And we'd go and play shows there, and you'd basically play, if there were 4 bands on the bill, the only people in the audience were the other bands at that time. But then there was one time we sold it out, and there's like 40 people there, and we're like, "Yeah, we've done it." And Di Servich, she's just an amazing human. Like I love Di so much. And so she gave us like our first start, like, before even Cody was 19 at that time, like before we were playing in Crownlands. And she gave me my first sound gig job there, right? Because they needed somebody to operate the PA, and so again for like 40 or 50 bucks a night and maybe a panini sandwich if I was lucky, that was my payment. I would go and mix all the shows all night, and like I really cut my teeth, mixing audio there. And then I eventually started doing sound at the Atria, and like the best shiniest bar in the scene was the Mustache Club, and that was owned by Nate and Jacob, and the two amazing, amazing humans, fantastic sound guys. And so I started working sound there. And that was the first time I worked on digital boards instead of analog. And they really took me under their wing. And I'm so thankful for them. And, that was like our first like big gig. We ended up playing the Mustache Club. We opened up for the Elwins. Do you remember the Elwins? Like they had that big hit So Down Low. Fantastic guys, great band. And I ended up yeah like and it, yeah so I ended up working there as well for a number of years. So there were a lot of good venues, and like the scene was there, but it was either like the super hip kind of like indie folk thing that was happening at the time, or a lot of metal, and that kind of throwback rock and roll sound really was it wasn't cool at that time. So is it still cool? I don't think it's ever really been cool. It's never really been, other than like that brief moment where Greta Van Fleet exploded, and then we actually received a lot of mainstream opportunities because of that. But that was it. And then we just had to kind of like carve out our own path.
You released the two EPs, Mantra and Rise Over Run, in 2016 and 2017. What opportunities presented themselves once you had, the physical disc that you could hand out to show that you guys are talented? Instead of before that, you can just tell people, hey, we're good, you should check us out. But having that business card in audio form definitely helps.
Definitely, yeah. And we sold a ton of those, right? We sold like a couple thousand copies of each one by the time that of like 2017 rolled around, right? Because we were hustling and we were touring. Basically every summer we'd go to like Cape Breton Island and back, and we would just play like all the way out there. We did all of Ontario a bunch. We did so many 401 runs like up and down the college towns. That was kind of how we built up a bit of a following, because at that time, because we were 10 10 years younger, we had so much more of like a finger on the pulse of like the whole kind of college scene. And so we'd go and play like in like there'd be dorm houses that had a venue in the basement where it's just like a crappy little PA, and you're just going and ripping it and having a blast. And we were doing that like all across the college towns in Ontario and all out through the East Coast. And Rise Over Run gave us way bigger opportunities though, right? So that year that we dropped Rise Over Run, we won Rock Search at for Hits FM 97.7 out in St. Catharines. And that was a huge win for us. And that was when we shot the music video for Mountain. And that was like our first real big opportunity where before that video came out, like it circulated in music industry emails for a few months, where like I sent it to every booking agent in the country. I sent, because like that was really what I wanted more than anything else. I was like, we don't need a record label. We can make our own records. What I need is a booking agent who can help us get to that next level of playing shows, different kinds of shows, right? Because we had worked our butts off up to that point, and I was booking all of our shows, but it's a lot of work. And so we sent that to everybody, and then Ralph James came to one of our shows, and
He's
Ralph,
one of the giants in the booking industry.
he is, man, he is. He came to one of our shows, he liked it, and he saw our video. He invited us to his office downtown with him and Mike Graham, and they basically said like, hey, like we're your agents now, like let's go. And it was a huge, huge break for us, and we started playing shows with headstones. Actually, so at that point, like I was paying for everything with the band. This is going to was that 2017 or 2018? I think it would have been 2017, right?
It's all
I
a
think
blur.
It's all a blur. It was 2017 or 2018. Anyways, like I was working as a custodian full time in the day, at the armory downtown Oshawa. So I was like a civilian contractor, like so I was just like surrounded by soldiers all day, every day. And then at night I would be hosting open mics or doing sound, working at venues all around downtown too, and just grinding it out. And every cent went into buying the band van, buying merch, paying to make those records, printing the CDs, paying for studio time, paying for the mastering. And so like I funded the entire thing myself because Cody was in school still. And it was a lot of work. And that first break that we got, with Mike and Ralph was huge because all of a sudden, instead of getting paid $100 for a gig, we're getting paid $500 for a gig. And it was like, wow, we're doing it, And that first gig that we did, was we played Casino Rama with the Headstones, and it was this huge, huge break. And that was actually the first time that I played a show with my double neck as well. I drove all the way to Montreal to buy that double neck in a blizzard because I saw it on Kijiji and I was like, oh my God, this is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. And yeah, I drove and bought that, and then we played the show with the Headstones like right after.
We like casino money. They're well funded.
We do like casino money. I love playing casino gigs. They always put you up in a nice hotel. The food is good. The stage always has, great PA, great, the stage wings are nice. You can set everything up in it. And you're right, yeah, the casino, luckily we get paid more than $500 now, but that was the first, yeah, that was the first big break, I think.
And their checks don't usually bounce, which is a bonus. We have a fan question about a double neck, and I think this is from your mom. This is from Lisa Como. Is that your mom?
That's my mom.
She sent in a fan question. That's a supportive mom. She asks, what is his favorite guitar and or bass? Also, which double neck?
My favorite double neck is definitely the custom Stoico that Brock Stoico built for me a couple of years ago. I'll go get it. It's probably my favorite instrument, period, anyways. It's such a great guitar. But yeah, it's so light and you can see like how, well, like the ergonomics of it just makes so much sense. And yeah, it looks cool, it sounds great, it plays great. Yeah, it's probably my favorite instrument. It rocks.
You would assume that it would be heavy, but I guess they figured that out.
Well, it's still heavy. It's still like 11 and a half pounds. It still weighs about as much as a Les Paul does. But it's just really well balanced. And like we spent like 8 months. Was it 8 months? I think 8 months from like, when I hit Brock up and I was like, hey man, like, we got to build this. And we built this. So we played a gig in Bahrain. We played at Sal's Palace. So Sal is the crown prince of Bahrain. So he invited us out to play the Formula One Grand Prix after party a few years ago, and that was a sick, sick gig, and it paid us really well. And from that gig, I used, my modest earnings from it to pay for this double neck, and that was right when we were in the middle of recording the Fearless record. And so, I'd write a new part or record a new part. I'd send a message to Brock and be like, okay, it needs to have a wiggle stick now because all the solos have whammy bar parts and we're recorded on the Strat. And I'm like, but we need to have humbuckers in it because I recorded all the rhythm guitars with my SGs, and the bass has to have, I was borrowing my friend's Rickenbacker to record all the bass parts. I was like, but so the bass needs to basically essentially be a Rickenbacker. And I'm like, but I need it to be really light and really ergonomic. So I kept, I sent him the shape of the instrument that it needed to be. And I was like, we need to have like the Strat style contours so I can actually play it easily. And then again, Scully, who is Getty's tech, was working with us in the studio at that time. And I was asking, we ended up getting on a three-way call with Brock, the guy who built the guitar. It's like, how do we wire this so that way we can use one jack because the guitar and the bass need to be through separate outputs. And at that time, my whole rig was using three different cables. I had a cable for my six-string guitar, and then two different cables for my double neck, where I had to send the bass and then and the other guitar attached to that bass to be, sent to different outputs. So I had all like three cables on stage, and it was just too many cables. And so Scully's idea was to wire it as TRS. So that way it's like just one stereo cable and you send one side, which is, the bass to one amp and then the guitar side to another amp. And that way, if you plug that TRS cable into a regular guitar, it just goes to the guitar amp again. So it was a genius move. And it cut down the complications of building a live rig that needs to accompany custom double necks and regular guitars like all in the same pedal board and the same amp setup. So yeah, that's how we did it. And
You created a monster.
we did.
It's the
We did.
Frankenstein of double
Yeah,
necks.
it is.
That's amazing. In 2018, you guys opened up for Jack White on the Canadian leg of his tour. Is that you seeing the fruits of your labor with Ralph James as a booking agent, starting to get some of these like
Yeah,
insanely impressive gigs?
that was a huge break, man. That was a huge break for us. But it was still like, it's kind of harrowing touring across Canada in the winter when you're bus chasing. And so bus chasing means you're the opening band in a van and the headliner has a bunch of buses. And so the way that a bus tour works is band plays show, band goes back on bus and goes to sleep. While band is asleep, driver drives for 10 hours to the next gig, then driver goes to sleep for the day and then drives everyone at night. When you are bus chasing as the support band, you are in the van. You cannot afford a driver. So you have to leave after because the headliner gets to count out their merch first. Then you get to count out your merch. And then after that, now you leave after the headliner. And now it's 2 a.m. Now you get to go and drive 10 hours through the storms, across the mountains in November and hopefully get to the next venue alive. And then by the time you get there, you're absolutely shattered because no one has slept all night. And it's not sustainable, it's not healthy, and it's still the only way that any band can actually make it work, sadly, when you're at that stage. It was a really good time. The shows were great, but God, it's a hard tour. It was a really hard tour. Like, it's not easy to drive from like Regina to Winnipeg and then Winnipeg to London, like all within a couple of day period. And you're like absolutely zonked. And, then you get on stage and you rip. But yeah, it was an amazing time. Jack treated us really well. He was a really cool dude. It really felt like that was us getting our first big break for sure.
When I interviewed Colorado, they shared basically the exact same story, but touring with Sum 41. And
Yeah.
I believe it was like in Europe or somewhere where there's also a time change, where it's like now that the timing is also very weird. So they'd have to drive through the night. And I think it's a 5 hour time difference to what they're used to. So just
Oh yeah.
messed up the internal clock.
Oh yeah, man. Like touring is not healthy, but it's so fun, It's just like there's something about the survival mode of, just like white knuckling it for, 8 hours straight, and then you get to a gig and you're like, and you're just like wound up so tight. And there's something about like I enjoy being in that kind of like manic state of, like survival mode. Like most people don't, but I kind of maybe as a masochistically like it.
So you're starting at this point to get your team in place. You have your booking agent. Up next is record label. How do you attract the attention of Universal Records?
Right. So, the next probably most important piece of the Crownlands team, it was Ollie Mitchell, who's still our manager to this day. And we were about to sign, we were offered a deal with Dynalone Records, and we would have been managed as well by Bedlam Management, right? So Bedlam and Dynalone are like basically one and the same.
Joel
And
Carriere.
Joel's an amazing guy, was a really big supporter of us early on. And Ollie had actually worked at Bedlam for a long time, but he had left Bedlam to join Unified down in California. And when we were mentioning that to Ralph, Ralph was like, interesting, but like before you sign anything, like like he's like I just he went to LA. He had there were for I forget what was it was some kind of big conference, and Ollie was there as well. And again, this is going back like to the Mountain music video. Ralph sent Ollie the Mountain music video, And Ollie was like, whoa, this is great. And then Ollie sent it to Ali Hagendorf, who at the time was the global head of rock at Spotify. And she thought it was great too. And so she put it on, a couple of those rock playlists at that time, which was gold, right? That could make or break a band's career. And that was like a really big deciding factor. So Ollie was like, hey, before you sign, like, get on the phone with me. And so we talked with Ollie, and his plan seemed to be a bit clearer than what we were being offered at the Dine Alone World. And it felt like there was just a bit more possibility and it was a really, really hard decision for me because like I was really enthralled with all of the amazing music that was coming out of Dine Alone at that time, right? Like that was when Dirty Nil had put out their first record. Sam Coffey and the Iron Lungs were having a really big moment. And I just loved that era of that label and all the music that was coming out of it, the culture. I really enjoyed being around everybody. And it was a really hard decision to sign with Ollie instead, but it felt like it was the right thing. He was in LA and that's where we wanted to be. And and he helped us get all of the music on Spotify, and that was just like such an important thing at that time, going back to like 2017, 2018. And so Ollie got us on the Canadian Music Week show, where we opened it up for Monster Truck at the Phoenix. And at that time, Monster Truck were on an enhanced distribution deal. They were on Dine Alone as well, but at the time, Dine Alone was being distributed by Universal, right? So again, like it's everyone's working with everyone at a certain point, right? There's 10 people in the entire music industry. We all know each other. And at that time, Madeline Napoleon was the marketing director at Universal. She's now actually, I think, the senior marketing director and vice president at Warner, right? So again,
Just a
everyone knows
big
that
incestuous musical family in Canada.
literally. Literally, it's crazy because Kristen, who was the vice president at Universal at the time, she's now the president of Warner, right? So everyone eventually just, you know,
There's
just bounces.
three major labels that you just transfer between.
It's true, right? And any of the indie labels are either in part owned by or distributed by those majors, right? There's just, it's very much like a monopoly. So anyway, so Truck is in an enhanced marketing deal, I think, with Universal, like through the deal with Dine Alone, and and so Madeline is at the show and she sees us play, and we impress everybody, and it's this great thing, and all of a sudden the wheels start turning of, wait a second, instead of trying to find ourselves an American indie label, do we sign with a Canadian major? And I was very against that idea because I was like, I don't want to be, sanitized or whatever. I don't want to be turned into something that, I don't feel comfortable with. And it took a really long time to decide to sign with them. And in fact, we had begun the discussions way before the Jack White tour. And in fact, even during the Jack White tour, I think we were starting to like, you know, we got a new lawyer and we were getting the deal memos, and we're like, I don't know. And we were getting on the phone like as we're driving through the mountains, like with, getting on the phone with the label, getting on the phone with our lawyers, getting on the phone. It's like, and all of this starts happening. And that actually, that was what we ended up doing. We ended up signing with Universal. And that was, it was because of Ollie, our manager, like helped us get that deal, and that was a huge, huge deal for us because that allowed us to go down to Nashville and record our first record with Dave Cobb at RCA Studios, which is, historic. That's where, Elvis did so much of his music. Chet Atkins did so much there, Johnny Cash, Dolly Parton. Really, really historic room, and it was a really good time.
This episode has been brought to you by the Women in the Music Industry podcast. It's hosted by music producer Rob Wells, who has worked with global superstars like Justin Bieber, Ariana Grande, and Selena Gomez. Through his 1-hour interviews, he shines a spotlight on the remarkable women who are breaking barriers and making their mark in the music industry. Some of his notable guests include Morgan Lander of the multi-million selling metal band Kitty, and Pam Shane, who co-wrote Genie in a Bottle for Christina Aguilera. If you're a fan of the Joel Martin Mastery podcast, you'll love the Women in the Music Industry podcast, which is available on all platforms. You sign with Universal, and then in early 2020, this global pandemic hits that just decimates most industries. It hits the music industry and the live touring industry harder than almost any other industry besides maybe the airlines and the restaurants, I guess. And then a few months later in June, you released the Wayward Flyers Volume 1 EP on Universal. What were the challenges in writing, recording, and releasing music during these chaotic and uncertain times?
Dude, it was the worst, man. It was the worst. Like, so we recorded our self-titled debut album, and then actually it was kind of a tricky thing because like we had written so many songs for that record. We wrote like 40 songs. We demoed 40 songs over the course of a year for that album, and we picked seven of them. And I'm not very happy with the seven that we picked because I don't think they actually represented what the band was doing. But a lot of that was Dave Cobb kind of pushing us in a direction that he kind of saw the band going in, which wasn't the direction the band was going in, right? Because at that point we had written The Oracle, we had written Context, Fearless Part One. We were writing like much larger, more atmospheric, and ambitious pieces of music. And after that, we ended up going down to Nashville and we recorded Context Fearless Part One and Right Way Back with Nick Raskulinecz. And that was right after Neil Peart had passed away. And so this is early 2020 before COVID hit. And that actually was, a huge break for us. That was a huge moment and like a big turning point for the band. We're like, oh, this is the kind of music we want to do. But a lot of the songs is again going back to when we were demoing, we had written a lot of songs that didn't quite fit anywhere. And the idea was like, hey, just in case, let's record an acoustic EP, back at Shelley's studio with her friend Justin. And so we did. We went back and we recorded
Wayward Flyers?
Wayward Flyers, thank you. And that this was probably like a week before the lockdowns, I think, dude. It was like that was the last time I think I saw everybody before the end of times arrived.
I
It was
remember
great.
the exact date because I was in Mexico, and I think like March 18th, 2020 was like the exact date where Trudeau gets on TV and he's like, if you see me right now and you're not in Canada, this is your last warning. If you do not come home from this warning, I can no longer guarantee your safety. So I always remember March 18th, 2020 is like the ultimate lockdown at the start.
Yeah, God. I think we were filming the music video for Sundance, the Allen Gardens in Toronto. And everybody, like I remember everyone's phones like went off and it was like, oh, the NBA shutting down. Right? And it was like, oh, like
This is real.
yeah, that was this really scary moment because then we were all just like looking at each other and we are like inside these gardens. We're like, should we even be here? And I think like that, it was a crazy time, man. And yeah, so anyways, yeah, it was not an easy time to be recording or releasing music, and it was like this kind of existential thing where like it felt like we were just screaming into the void. And you know, we were supposed to release that debut album and go on like a 40-date tour with Lark and Poe all across Europe. And that tour got postponed, postponed, postponed until it ultimately got canceled. And it was just, yeah, it was a terrible time, dude. It was worst time of our lives, I think. But, you know,
Did those 2 years of lockdowns where you couldn't play any shows, has that made you really appreciate all the shows you've done since then?
I think so. Yeah. I think but I still don't think the live music industry has actually bounced back properly. And it's never been the same after COVID. And it never will be the same, right? Like people don't go out in the same way. People also, I mean, the greed and the inflation that is, surmounted after COVID.
The surge pricing on tickets and
Well, and it's just everything, right? Like people can't afford to go out in the same way, and a lot of people just don't go out to support like the smaller artists the way they used to as well. I think culturally people are not as there's not as much of a sense of community anymore, and I think I hope it gets better, but I have yet to see it. In the last 5 years, it seems to have just gradually gotten worse and worse and worse since. So I don't know, like, but I am very, of course, I'm grateful for every opportunity I get to play live, and that's why I got into music. It's like you don't go in, you don't become a firefighter to like, it was like you don't become a firefighter and think like, well, I hope I don't have to help anybody. You go into that industry to help you. You go into music because you want to play music, don't you? It's like you don't become a boxer because you just want to sit around. You become a boxer because you want to fight. It's just like that's your craft, that's your thing. It's like my craft is to play music, and I haven't been able to nearly to the degree that I've wanted to, right? Like if I had it my way, I'd be on the road all like year round doing my thing, but there's no infrastructure for it, right? You're seeing like tours getting canceled left, right, and center. So you have to be really, really smart with where you choose to go and how you choose to tour.
The monopolies with Ticketmaster and Live Nation and all that. Before the pandemic, I would go to UFC events on top of all the like I'm always at concerts as well, but UFC events, anytime there was an event that was within driving distance. So Montreal, Ottawa, Toronto, Buffalo, somewhere like that, I would drive and go, and you would get nosebleed tickets for 60 to $80 before the pandemic. Since the pandemic, nosebleeds have been $530 to $640. That's what the ticket prices have been. And they just had a lawsuit with Ticketmaster and Live Nation in Ontario. And apparently, it sounds like resale tickets in Ontario moving forward are banned, where you can resell tickets, but they cannot be above the price that you paid for them. So hopefully that changes the concert industry moving forward.
I hope so, for sure, man. I mean, it's a step in the right direction. But you're right, like the monopolization by Live Nation, it's terrible, right? Where it's like during COVID though, they realized like they could just postpone these shows to the nth degree and people wouldn't cancel their tickets, right? And so all of a sudden they realized they had billions and billions of dollars of ticket revenue that was sitting there for years. And they were smart about the way they invested it, right? And they bought tons of real estate during that time, and they own the land under all of those new venues that are being built all across the world, right? Like the Rogers Arena up in what was the old venue there? It was like Rogers Stadium, right? They've built like that full stadium where Oasis went and played this year,
Oh
right?
yeah,
There's like
Rogers Stadium. Yeah.
yeah, everyone just says it's like the worst temporary venue of all time, right? Like the scaffolding is super sketchy. No one feels comfortable.
Apparently it
Uh,
takes like 2 hours to get in and get out because
yeah,
you park somewhere, you have to like take transit, then you have to walk across several football fields to get in.
yeah, it's terrible. But the thing is they own the land under it, right? So as soon as that venue is no longer viable in the next couple of years, like because eventually all of the artists that can sell those tickets are no longer going to be doing it. Just gonna tear it down and sell it to developers to build condos, right? And then Live Nation gets richer and richer and richer. And like it's a brilliant game. Like I wish I could play that game. That would be awesome. I can't blame them, for being so evil. It's like no wonder, it's like no wonder they're able to do what they do. And it's really hard because if you don't play ball with them, there's no one else in town to play with, right? And we're facing that down right now where, we're booking a bunch of shows with Live Nation. And I mean, don't get me wrong, like there's a couple of people who work there that I really do admire as people, but they're still like they're still working with, basically the most evil company in the industry, and you have no choice but to play ball with them. There was a time like when we were doing the July Talk tour, Live Nation bought that entire package, right? But it's like independent, like there's specific people who actually like work the different markets, right? There's a couple of folks who do like the Western legs, and a couple of people do the Ontario legs, a couple of people do like the East Coast legs of tours. And the guy who's in charge of us in Alberta, when he saw our contract, was like, "Oh, you're getting paid $2,500? That doesn't sound right. Somebody must have added a zero." Usually we only pay our openers 250. And even then, 2,500 dollars to play like Edmonton when you're from Ontario is like nothing. Like you're still losing money to play that. And it's just like the state of like how disgusting the music industry is, and Live Nation in particular, where it's like, hey, are you a Juno Award winning band who has, put out two or three records? You're worth like a few hundred tickets in every major market. You know what you're worth? That we're gonna pay you $250, and that's like the ad. Like that's like if you're opening for a band playing in front of that was like a 4,000 cap room where every ticket was like $40 or $50, and like any band at our level, like they're and like I'm very that's why we're so lucky to have the agents we have to like gun for it and push for it to try and get us like something close to a wage that actually gets us close to a break even. But like that's the state of the industry, dude. It's like, oh, you're an opening band, $250. That's the average. If even if you're paying more than that in gas just to get there for that day, let alone food, let alone your crew wages, let alone how much it costs to print your merch. That's the other thing about merch. They were taking 20 to 25% gross of our merch sales on that run. Like
And what makes it
evil.
even grosser is you can just take the ticket price multiplied by the 4,000 people and you can see how much money the show's generating. Like they can definitely afford to pay the opener better.
Oh yeah, even the headliners are getting screwed by Live Nation, man.
I just talked with a multi-platinum arena touring band, and they said that their current tour, that man, the malpractice that you get with Live Nation is that, for example, they should be playing New York City, and for some reason they look and they're booked somewhere else in New York State, like not an ideal location. And it turns out it's because the location they got booked at that's not ideal is one that's owned by Live Nation. So they're going to get money from the parking, from the hot dog and drink sales, from the merchandise, versus if they book them where they should have booked them, then they just get, the certain percentage from tickets. So they're not doing what's best for the artists that they're working with. They're
Oh,
doing what's best for the company.
oh, of course, yeah, of course. And I don't know, man. I think at this state of the world, like if any venue or any promoter that's taking a cut of merch, like just deserves to be like run out of town and gone out of business. I think it's like the most like absurd practice. And then I bring it up to my management or agents. They're like, "Oh, it's just the way it is." And it's like there's no support for the artists in any at any level, man. It's actually it's horrifying like how the industry is just like so vampiric towards artists, and there's just like and nobody at any level at any point is like actually passionate about helping. I just don't get it. I just don't get it.
As we go through your life, your career, your discography here in chronological order, we're still deep in the pandemic when you released the
Yeah,
self-titled debut
yeah.
full-length album Crownlands. This is August 13th, 2020. What thoughts, memories, emotions come back to you now when you think of that debut album that finally comes out after years of work and really kickstarted the amazing journey you've been on in the last 6 years?
Well, thanks, man. I mean, that again, it was released under trying circumstances, during, like that was like the height of COVID, and the only shows that we could actually play to support it were drive-in festivals, right? Where instead of clapping, people were honking their horns in their cars. That was such a crazy tour. But we did like a bunch of festivals with the Trues, and that was a really good time. And yeah, it's just a wild, wild time, man. But it felt great to finally have, like a debut record out and, have it on vinyl. I think the artwork worked out great. I remember the splatter print vinyl was amazing. And, we still play, a couple of songs from that record. I think the most important thing we put out from that album was End of the Road, which was our tribute to missing and murdered Indigenous women. And we made sure to work with Mi'kmaq artist Tim Miles on the music video. And, that was, I think that's the most important song on that record. And we still play that song at every show to make sure that we're using our platform to raise awareness about something that's still like a systemic issue, across this country.
The album gets nominated for a Juno for Rock Album of the Year, and you guys won Breakthrough Group of the Year. And we have a fan question. This is from Evelyn Withrow. The question is, Kevin, what were your immediate thoughts after it was announced that your band won the Juno Award? And did you guys do anything special to celebrate afterwards?
Um, Yeah, I mean,
Shots,
like my
shots, shots,
yeah,
shots.
no. Yeah. What did we do after? It's we won. The first thing I actually did is like I called my synth tech and about getting my Prophet 5 fix, which actually never worked out. We could never because of the chip shortage during COVID, we could never actually get the solid state magic chips that were needed for it. So right after that, I ended up selling the Prophet to a guy who knew where to get the chips. And then I bought an Oberheim synthesizer instead, which is actually my favorite synth ever now. So that's literally the first thing I did after like I called my synth tech and that was that. And it wasn't even about the Junos, it was about, my lifelong obsession with analog synthesizers. So maybe not as exciting, but exciting to me.
When you said, right away I called, I thought, okay, he's calling his mom, he's calling whoever. It's no, it's the synth tech.
My synth tech, yeah, that is what I did.
In 2021, you start working with David Bottrell, all-time great mega producer here. You work on some great songs like Context, Fearless Part 1, White Buffalo, The Oracle. How does David come into the picture? Is it his work with other prog rock bands, Rush and King Crimson and Tool? Is that what drew you to him?
Yes, yeah, for sure. And also just like a lot of it though, the way we started working with Dave was we had already recorded the music for Context and Right Way Back, but the vocals for Context weren't quite right. Cody didn't quite nail it in Nashville. And this was like right before the lockdowns happened, and then post lockdown, it's like, well, there's no way you're getting back down to America. And David lives across the street from or at the time he lived across the street from the studio that Universal was building down in Liberty Village, and it was just a matter of Dave being like, "Yeah, you guys just come to my place and we can record it there." And it was like, "Okay, great. You mean we get to cut the vocals with the guy who helped Peter Gabriel and Tool? Like this is unbelievable. Sure, this is ridiculous. This is like, it's like bringing in." I don't know. It's just it felt like bringing Babe Ruth into like a little league game. And you're like, okay, sure, like you just want to if this is the guy to cut our vocals, like okay, no problem. And we just got along with him so well. It was such a great experience, and it just made sense to keep working with him on the rest of these like larger, more conceptual pieces of music. And the first thing Dave said when, he came to the studio, because like we sent him early versions of Witching Hour and White Buffalo, Inner Light, all of the music on the White Buffalo record. And the first thing he said is like, you guys are overcomplicating this. He's like, you need to add a beat to pretty much every section because White Buffalo was originally written in 13/8. And if you add a beat to every other measure, it becomes 14/8 or 7/4, right? And the chorus was in 7. He's like, no, you got to add a beat to that. So that way it becomes 4. And we're like, okay, no problem, right? So we ended up simplifying a lot of the music. But it still remains, I'd say, rhythmically fairly complex. But he kind of like pantomime. He's like, "This is you guys." Like after a certain point, he's like, just pantomimes like shooting yourself in the foot. He's like, "This is you every time." Because like every time we bring a song to him, he's like, "Oh yeah, there's an 11/8 keyboard solo." And he's like, "Why? Why? Why do you have to complicate everything?" I'm like, "I don't know. It's fun."
And
So
this is coming from a guy that did Tool's Anima and Lateralis albums.
exactly. Ridiculous. He's such a cool guy, though. I love David for so many reasons. He's so dry, and he's so well. You know him. You've worked with him. He's so he can be so dry with it, but like he's just an absolute genius. Where like he'll be like, okay, at bar 256, you go from 5 to 6, but I think you need to do 2 bars of 6 instead because like and it's like, oh yes, of course. And he will harmonically analyze your music in such a brilliant way that most producers will just be like, I'm sure you've worked with a lot of producers, on your podcast who will be like, yeah, man, that part that goes like da na na, you should go like da na 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 na, Whereas David will be like, when you go from C to G, I think you actually need to go from C to F or F to C or something. You're like, wow, this guy really knows his stuff, and he's really pushed us to kind of up our game. And for instance, a lot of the Oracle, he's like, you have so many riffs here, and they all start on C. Like, does that feel a little drony to you? And my quip back to him literally was like, bro, you worked on Tool. Like their entire discography is D, D, D. Oh wow, there's a B flat D. And like that's their whole shtick. Is that kind of like modal droney thing. And I was just really surprised. But maybe it's just because he worked on that for so long. He's done with any like droney modalism. He's out. So it was like a really fun time working with him because like he won't let you get away with anything. Like you have to kind of explain yourself of why you're doing it. And he's pushed us to up our arranging and our composing, much further than anybody else has.
I have some kind words from one David Bottrell, and he says,
Oh,
we got the man here. He says, it's an honor and a pleasure to work with Kevin. Such a virtuoso musician, embracing a classic style of music and bringing it to a new young audience. Beyond that, he's a fine human being and a great friend. That's from David Bottrell.
oh, what a guy. What a guy. That's so nice. Yeah, I love Dave. He's such a cool guy, man. Like, oh, that's awesome. Because like he's been in the producer chair so many times, and I've been in the playing chair. But he doesn't do this with a lot of people because most people don't ask him, but like he's an amazing bass player, like amazing. And so we've invited him to here to the studio to play bass with us, on some songs. And then it's so funny because then it's like the roles are reversed where he's playing the bass and I'm like, give me another take, maybe, give me one more take. And he just starts laughing because he's like, it's just kind of like a funny thing where I'm like,
You're
wait a
probably
second.
enjoying it so much with the
Oh, it's
roles
so fun.
reversed.
Yeah, like how do you get, you got to produce, one of your favorite producers. It's a great time.
You mentioned the White Buffalo EP that came out in September of 2021. The song White Buffalo itself is the band's most played song on Spotify, almost 3 million plays. Why do you think people love that song so much?
Because it happened to get on a rock playlist at the right time. I don't know what to say other than that, maybe. I would argue, yeah, like I think it is probably our best song, from like that perspective. It's like, where it's progressive. The bridge is interesting, where there's a couple, bars of seven, couple bars of eight, so it kind of becomes like 15. So rhythmically, it's interesting. Harmonically, it's kind of interesting because the verse you could consider it as G minor, and then the pre-chorus you modulate to a G major, which then goes into a C, which I think again harmonically is one of my favorite things that we've written for that reason because like it kind of pulls your ear, but it doesn't feel blocky in that way. Like I think it changes keys in a really smooth way. I think the lyrics and the vocal melody like stand the test of time. Yeah, I don't know. It's one of those things that like you never know what's going to be your biggest song. Darren, who we worked with at Spine Farm, they were our European label while we were signed to Universal. And when we put that song out, he's like, "This song came too early in your career." I was like, "Oh wow," because like we didn't have the resources to tour in support of that record enough. And I feel like that song could have been even bigger because it received a bunch of play on BBC Radio 1 as well. It was just one of those things like going back to like, touring means you have to spend a lot of money, early on. And at that point in our career, we just really weren't in a place to spend that much money on touring. And also like it was, still kind of during the pandemic, right? 21, it's still like, rolling lockdowns. And in fact, like the Western leg of the White Buffalo Canadian tour, we had to cancel because that was, when everything got shut down in the West quicker than it did in Ontario, right? Because everything like spiked again, right? So, God, Joel, what a time, man! What a crazy
I'm
time.
almost
So,
making you suffer all over again talking about the years
yeah,
during
no,
the pandemic.
yeah, no, it's all good, man. What are you gonna do? It's
I
all
can
good.
feel the pain in your voice as you recall these memories.
Yeah, I'm just like, it's like, why? Yeah, why did that Western leg go away? Oh, yes, right. All of the other, well, I mean, I didn't suffer as much as people who were, out there, getting sick suffered, right? Like, so.
A lot of your songs have different time signatures. We talked about White Buffalo and how you're counting it. When you play these songs live that are in different time signatures, or the time signatures are changing back and forth, even in the same song, are those more challenging to play? Like, do you have to really make sure you're paying attention to not miss the one or go out of time or miss a section?
Yeah, definitely you're paying more attention. But I think like at this point, we wrote it. It's in our brains, it's in our DNA. I think it's easy enough. It's not like we're sitting there counting like one, two, three, four, five, six, seven, one, two, like when we're writing it, we definitely are. And I think Cody and I have this realization now that like if we can play something easily at the beginning of the writing process, we usually just throw it out and make it more complicated after. And then inevitably David will come up to us and be like, "Why did you make this so complicated?" Like, I don't know. And he's like, "Simplify it, boys, simplify it." And so we often will. So a song like Apocalypse on the new record, no one was there to tell us to simplify it, so we pushed it way further than maybe we normally would. And but because of that, it's a reflection of us probably even clearer than most of our songs because of that.
You somehow release a live album in 2021, Odyssey Volume 1. How do you it's hard to even play shows in 2021. How do you pull off a live show
Well, yeah,
and recording it?
that was basically just live in front of
Was it live
like
off the floor, kind of?
it was just live off the floor kind of thing. We did like a live stream event at that time with was it Prog Magazine and Classic Rock Magazine. So basically, we were like 10 people in the room. There was us and then like our friends who were recording the audio and our friends who were filming it. So it was just kind of like a live off the floor sort of thing. But we really wanted to showcase what we were about as a band, right? Because that was the thing. Like it's just, it felt like we were lopped off at the knees, where it was like, hey, you're you're a live band. You've built your entire career around it. We built our team from the ground up with agents instead of management or labels, right? Like we went the way that's like we want to play shows and like prove that we're good that way before we worry about anything else. And for a few years we couldn't do any of that, so that's why we put that up on YouTube, and that kind of led to the culture of like every time we put out a record we would record or film live performances of as many of the songs that we could, just so that way we could showcase like, oh, this is how you pull it off with just two guys, with no trickery, no tracks, and all that good stuff.
We have a fan question from Vicky Sove. She wants to know if you have any memorable stories of how you acquired some of your favorite guitars. You've mentioned a few, but anything interesting about a way you purchased a guitar?
Sure. I think the most interesting story related to any of the guitars in this room is probably my Alvarez double neck acoustic. So I can go get it. It's like show and
Yeah,
tell.
go
I'll
ahead.
go get it. This was actually gifted to me by Alex Lifeson. So this was built for Alex around 77 or 78. And he never really played it because I mean, what are you gonna do with a double neck acoustic? Like it's a very, very niche thing. So after we met at that charity gig, I think that was 21, right? Or 22? I don't know. Probably 20, whatever. One of those years. Um, anyways, that was right around when he was doing that charity auction where he was getting rid of a bunch of his guitars. And him and Scully were cataloging all the serial numbers, and so like I went over to his house and was helping them tune up the guitars and catalog all the serial numbers and all that good stuff. And during that time, like Alex was like, "Oh, so I know you're a big fan of Alvarez." So like when we played that gig, we did Battle of Evermore by Zeppelin, and I played my Alvarez acoustic, which is like a this Japanese brand. And he's like, "I've got an Alvarez acoustic too," and he pulled this thing out, and I was like, okay, he's like, do you want to hold on to for me for a while? I was like, no problem. So he gave this guitar to me, and it's been, yeah, it's just been mine ever since. And basically, any of the acoustic guitars you've heard on any of those records that have come since, like, have been with that guitar.
In 2023, you guys released the album Fearless. This is what the album that made me a fan. I've been on the bandwagon for the last 3 years and counting. When you have songs like Starlifter Fearless Part 2 that are over 18 minutes, how much of a challenge is it to figure out your set list live? Because when you're an opening band, that's like the length of your entire set.
I'd argue it makes it easier. It's like, I mean, there was this one time here, I'm gonna go put this guitar back. This one time we had done, that was when that right before that record actually came out. We had a half-hour set opening up for the Trues for like a one of those like Christmas radio parties for like a radio station. And we had half an hour, and the radio station was like that. This was at the time like our Come Together cover was at like number 4 on the charts, and like they were like, you have to play this song, the label wants you to play it, and every blah blah blah. And we're like, screw that. We're gonna open up, and this was before Starlifter came out. And so we opened up the set. We played Starlifter and then we played Context. So like that was half an hour. It was two songs. It was two songs and it was done. And that was kind of it was just so stupid and over the top prog, and it was like perfect. And it was just like you gotta have that like attitude of just like having fun with it and like being over the top and being silly. And it becomes fairly easy to figure out the set list when you have longer songs because of that. Because you're like, well, Starlifter is just such a great set opener where if you're a fan of the band, that's going to be one of your favorite songs, I'd imagine, And if you're not a fan of the band, if you never heard us before, that's just a great statement piece because it kind of like it's like a sample of everything that the band's about, right? It's got like, every couple minutes it changes, and there's like a whole new section that like, hey, maybe you'll like this part, and it showcases a different kind of side of the band, and so it's kind of like a nice little sample pack of everything we're all about. And yeah, ever since we wrote that song, it's been our set opener for the better part of 3 years. So I'm sure it's going to change eventually, but it makes kind of picking that fairly easily. It makes it easy to kind of pick the song. Yeah.
Listening to your entire discography, there's so many amazing guitar riffs, guitar parts. If the video game Guitar Hero came to you guys and said, "Hey, we want just one Crownlands song to add to the video games that fans can play along to," what one song do you think you would put in?
Ooh, that's a good one. I'd say either Dreamer of the Dawn or White Buffalo. Like Dreamer of the Dawn's kind of underrated. I'm a big fan of that one. I think like harmonically it's interesting. I really like all the shapes that I do on it. Yeah, but White Buffalo again is like it's a ripper and it's fun.
With the album, you guys receive your third Juno nomination. Again, this one is for Rock Album of the Year. We have a fan comment. This is from Tim Randa. The comment is, I saw them open for July Talk a couple of years ago at Massey Hall, so the same tour that I saw. He says, I couldn't believe it was just two guys on stage. So he had the same reaction I had when I saw Rush, where I'm like, I can't believe it's just three guys on stage.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, that's kind of again what we're going for. We try to one up our favorite band or one down.
In 2023, you guys went on tour with Kiss for their final tour. And around that time, Gene Simmons did an interview with Rolling Stone. And about you guys, he said, we have a band that's opening for us here in Canada. They're fantastic. Two guys, no tapes. They're called Crownlands. You should check them out. What does that mean to you when there's like one of the most popular figures in music history says something like that in Rolling Stone of all magazines?
Yeah, that's huge, man. I mean, Gene is such a class act, and same thing with Paul. Everyone in that band, man, like they are just great humans. They treated us so well. I have nothing but the best things to say about them, and it's really cool that they have nice things to say about us, man. Like hopefully, hopefully that that just gives goodwill and leads to more good things. But you never know.
You guys release Ritual 1 and 2 in July and August of 2025. Gets another Juno nomination, this time for Instrumental Album of the Year. How do you choose to keep the music instrumental? Like, how do you know if you should be adding vocals or lyrics or not?
That's a good question. I think those records in particular, we really wanted to have, kind of be separate from the rest of our discography, where it kind of tells a different part of the storyline that we've been building since the White Buffalo record, where the Oracle starts the Fearless chronology, and then Starlifter kind of carries it forward, and then the rituals kind of tell the story of like the peace on the planet before all of the chaos that ensues on Starlifter and then on Apocalypse. And so there's no singing when there's peacetime. There's just meditating and chilling. And it was also, I think it was just a conscious decision where even though Cody's not singing on those records, I think Cody's authorship on the music, I think, is actually more present on the rituals than on any other Crownlands record, because everything else, like I'm writing all the music and Cody's coming up with like a big chunk of the vocal melodies and a chunk of the lyrics, but it's like the the rituals, I'd say like Cody's influence is actually strongest because Cody's coming up with most of the melody on the flutes, and I think there's a lot more melodic content, on Cody's part on those records, and so I just don't think there was that desire to bring the vocal side of things because there's already so much to be said on that instrument.
Last year was the band's 10-year anniversary. Did you guys do anything to celebrate?
No, no, we did not. I don't think we. I think we tried not even think about that. Um, but it's a crazy thing to get to, man. I mean, most bands do not make it to that point. I mean, most marriages don't even make it to that point, right? Like, I think it's remarkable that we're still doing it, especially, like we hit like a lot of hardships, through COVID, and then as soon as we come through that and we drop Fearless, Cody had like a really hard time with a number of personal things, and we weren't sure if we were going to continue as a band. So just the fact that we're even here now, like putting out Apocalypse and planning another tour, this time, around we're finally going to be going to Europe as well, which, it's just wild, man. Like it's just been such a long ride, and the prophets of rock, AC/DC, truly said it best. It's a long way to the top if you want to rock and roll. So
We've made it from your earliest musical memory all the way up to today. Let's talk about Apocalypse. This comes out in 48 hours. So it's Wednesday right now. This comes out on Friday. It'll be out by the time people are watching this interview. How has the reception been so far for the songs that have already been released in advance? And what can fans expect from the songs that they're going to hear for the first time come Friday?
yeah, I mean the reception's been great, man. Again, this record, it's a continuation from Fearless where it's the closest thing to the sound that Cody and I feel like hear in our heads when we think about Crownlands. I think it's got all of the elements that make us excited about music. The title track in particular, where, pretty much every key signature and time signature is represented in there. The narrative that we've been building is so much more like present, whereas instead of just being present through side one, as it was on Fearless, it's present through side one and two, right? Where the complete narrative, is actually told of, the fall of, the Dragon Riders of Karagon, and then the formation of the Syndicate on their home planet, and the civil war that breaks out on the Syndicate's planet, the destruction of Black Star's family. Like I think the narrative is a lot stronger and more present. And I think, yeah, people are gonna, just get pummeled over the face with like epic, hard, progressive rock for the other songs that have yet to be heard. Although on the Revenants, they get treated to, I think, my favorite vocal performance of Cody's on the whole record. There's just such a tenderness and a fragility there, where that was the last vocal we recorded for the record, and Cody's vocals were spent from being so high up, and so like there's like a really like subtle, soft like falsetto on that record, on that song, on that record, and I think that it presents itself like as, being a really special moment on side one that people haven't heard yet as well. So
His vocal range is so astonishing.
oh, it's ridiculous, man. Yeah.
It's so wild. We have a fan question from Stephanie Morrow. The question is, what do you attribute to your dynamic changes in sounds over your discography?
Lack of focus.
I feel like
Uh,
listening to the earlier stuff, there's more of the blues influence, if that makes sense.
yeah, for sure. I think that was a conscious decision because, as I said before, right, the first bands that I was in, I was trying to make epic progressive rock, and the first bands Cody was in, Cody was trying to make epic progressive rock, and then the first band Cody and I played in was long, drawn out, like mostly instrumental progressive rock. And when we made Crownlands, I think there was a conscious effort to strip what we were doing down to the bare essentials, and especially on the Mantra EP, where there's like a lot more of like that kind of like blues rock, kind of like fat Black Keys, White Stripes influence. And that's why it's so amazing that eventually we ended up touring with Jack White, because those were bands that excited us at the time. Whereas like Rush was our favorite band, but there was nothing around that kind of did that thing. And so we kind of recognized like there's not an audience for this. And so maybe cynically we tried to simplify our sound to like chase any kind of success that we were seeing at the time, where it was almost like that, like we call it like beer commercial rock or truck commercial rock that we were trying to maybe adopt or embrace into our own sense of, musicality or sensibilities. And Rise Over Run was the first time we were like, screw it, no, let's do something weirder, right? And maybe the closest thing to blues rock maybe would be Mountain, but even then, that's like that to me is the sound of like I was listening to nothing but like Allman Brothers at Fillmore East at that time, but my favorite bands were still like Sabbath and Rush, and like you hear that on that record where there's a lot more slide guitar, but it's like a lot heavier and a lot more progressive than Mantra even was, and I think that was us pushing into a more accomplished sense of musicality. And I can't help but think that if we had pursued working with a smaller record label, I think our self-titled debut album would have been different. We wouldn't have been able to afford to work with Dave Cobb, and Dave Cobb was an amazing person to work with, but through the pressures of we got signed to Universal because of the success of Greta Van Fleet, right? We wouldn't have been signed to Universal if it wasn't for them making millions of dollars off of the success of Highway Tune. And there was that unspoken pressure of like, hey, like, push into this kind of world. And so we did, right? Because even after Rise Over Run, we wrote Context Fearless Part 1 right after that. And we wrote The Oracle, and we were writing longer, more progressive music at that time. And as I said, we demoed like 40 different songs. We wrote The Witching Hour during that time as well, which is another 5, 6 minute, mostly, like a big storytelling piece. There's a big instrumental intro, big instrumental outro, big instrumental bridge. We were already writing this kind of music. And there wasn't quite, how do I say, there like there wasn't like it didn't feel like the right time to like embrace that side of things. And even though it was within us at the time, and it wasn't until, we finally were able to release that music and we're like, oh, this is actually getting far more reception than that kind of blues rock thing. And again, the self-titled debut album, I think felt a bit of like a sidestep, in retrospect, where we were already moving. Like I'd say Rise Over Run is closer to the sensibilities of Context Fearless Part 1 and White Buffalo and Fearless than the self-titled album is. And so you can kind of see like we were we were already moving in that direction, but we just had to kind of like hop over it with the self-titled album. And I think I'm kind of thankful in a lot of ways that like that album did nothing and we didn't get to tour it and we didn't get to go over to Europe with Larkin Poe, who are a fantastic roots blues band. But like you quickly get pigeonholed in that world as like a roots blues band, especially in Europe, especially in UK, because the press works so differently there. And had we pursued that, I think we would have lost a big piece of our souls, where we would have felt like pressure to pursue a sound that maybe we weren't as enthralled by as we were with like that progressive world. Does that make sense, Joel? Like
Maybe
the
things
sound that
worked out the way they should have worked out.
I think so. Yeah, because now like because I think Apocalypse is the closest, sonically we've gotten to the sound that we've wanted to get to.
It's more of the truest statement that you guys can make right now as a band.
Exactly. Perfectly said. Hey, dude, you should do more of these. You wrap it up so succinctly, man.
Just
Nice.
thousands of hours worth of interviews to get one good quote that comes up. But
Uh,
speaking of good quotes, I have perhaps the most important quote of this entire interview. This comes from an amazing singer-songwriter who just released a new album maybe 6 weeks ago. This should be your favorite singer-songwriter because this is the wifey. This is Kaylin McGee, and she provides a quote saying, Kevin is a musical genius, and he's funny and gentle and kind, and sometimes he's stinky, but mostly he's handsome and wonderful. The
uh,
greatest pleasure in my life has been getting to love him. And she provides a question. The question is, how did you get to be so cute? Heart emoji. So that's from Caitlin.
that is the best. Oh, thank you. Well, I love my wife, and she's an amazing musician, and she's a prolific songwriter, man. She put out what was it, a 21 song album last year, and then did like a 10-song covers album following it up. And now this year she just dropped an 8-song concept album. And so like I've produced, engineered, and mixed, and even mastered most of those as well. So like I've been very, very busy with her music just as well as Crownlands, and I've produced a few other fantastic artists during during this period as well. But that's awesome, man. I do love her, man. She's the best.
I think you guys deserve each other for the epicness that you guys both have with the musicianship and the musicality.
Totally, man. Yeah, she's taught me so much about like how you can just write a song. Like, it's humbling, man. Like, because again, like I'll come home and be like, "Honey, check it out. We wrote this crazy riff today. Took us 8 hours." And she's like, "Oh yeah, and that time I wrote an entire song." I'm like, "Oh, well, that's better than one riff." Damn, right? So she's really like inspired me to kind of up my game as a songwriter, because she's a yeah, she's a true artist, man. She reminds me of Joni Mitchell because she's not just a writer, she's a painter, right? So she paints most of the album covers as well, and so yeah, she's a genius as well. So it's cool to be in that thing. It's just the trouble is, when you have two musician artists in a relationship, who's actually going to earn any money to keep it going? So that's the only I think that's the only stress in our lives or any artist's life, right? Is how do you pay the rent every month?
Yeah, where's the
Um,
steady income? You need one partner that's a teacher or something.
Ironically, we are both teachers. We both teach part time. So there you go. So that is the answer right there. But there does seem to be like there's a strong relation, the correlation between like yeah, like a lot of teachers seem to marry musicians, and musicians marry teachers. So what are you gonna do?
There's a lot of teachers that go on to have success as musicians, someone like Amos Lee, because you work hard and you save up, and then suddenly you have whatever that is, 3 months off. So you have the money saved up, and now you can release an album and tour without having to take time off of your job.
Yep, that is a great point for sure. And then and also to be an artist, you have to be a kid. You have to like capture that joy and like who knows the language of joy better than children, man? Like they haven't realized how to, how bad the world is yet. They're just excited to be there. And I think there's nothing better than, the more time you spend with kids, I think it's really good for your soul. And, because like I learned just as much from my students as, hopefully they learn from me, right? It's, again, just engaging and being joyful.
You guys wrapped up a tour in Ontario in March and April. What were a few of the highlights from those shows?
Joel, dude, the whole tour was a highlight. Like, let me tell you, that was the first tour in a long time where nothing bad happened. On like the Greta Van Fleet tour, in the States, like we actually got stranded in New Mexico with no money because the tour got canceled because Josh's eardrum, he got sick, his eardrum got like infected or something, and then the guy who was running our merch table was the same guy doing Greta's, and so as soon as the tour ended, he flew home with like $10,000 with our money, and we were like, dude, can you like transfer this to us? Like, yeah, no problem. But the transfer took like 2 or 3 days, so we were stranded in New Mexico, no money. Crazy time. The Kiss tour, Paul Stanley got sick. A couple of shows got canceled, so we were stranded there again. Classic rock and roll. When you're touring, somebody's always going to get sick. But when you're headlining, it's nice because like you're autonomous. Like it's if as long as nothing goes wrong in your own camp, you're good. And thankfully, nothing went wrong in our
And
camp.
there's
And it
only
was
two of you, which helps to lower, when you're Slipknot and there's 9 members, something's gonna go wrong.
something is going to go wrong eventually. Oh my God. But luckily, that run, nothing went wrong. The whole tour was a highlight because this was our first time headlining, playing theaters instead of clubs. And, I was saying before, like when you get onto a stage with a beautiful PA, great local crews, the stages have wings, so you can actually set up everything like right on stage. And it was just amazing. The venues were beautiful. The green rooms were beautiful. The catering was better. Just like we were fed decently. It was just, it was the most civilized tour we've done in a long time. It was just so nice. The shows were really well received. The shows sold really well. Like we averaged like, about 500 tickets a night, which is, amazing for doing an evening with progressive rock, right? And we were able to put on the show we wanted to. We brought in our own stage dressing and we had it like look like the apocalypse on our planet, so even when people walked in through the doors, we brought like a bunch of like ivy, and so we like kind of like had all of these plants like leading to the stage and the merch table and on the stage, so it kind of felt like as soon as you walked through the doors, like it's welcome to Crownlands. Like, it really felt as immersive an experience as we could make it. We played 3 sets. We did an instrumental set playing all the ritual music in disguise as the Dragon Riders of Karagon under these big like space druid robes, and it was just so fun because like you could hear people kind of like snickering in the front, like is that them or isn't it them kind of a thing, like. And then we did like the duo set. We played the most of, like the Fearless material and the White Buffalo material. And then we did like a 20-minute intermission, and we embraced like the full kind of like Talking Heads Stop Making Sense for 80s Genesis thing where we brought on extra members for the first time. And so we brought this amazing bass player named Daniel Walton and a keyboard player slash drummers named Adam Inrig, and they play in a band called the Dreamland Band. And I produced a record with them late last year, and we just got along with them famously. And so we invited them to come out and jam with us, and they're just the amazing musicians. And so it really helped us bring some of the elements to life that are on the Apocalypse record that you normally wouldn't get just as a duo, right? Because like normally you have to kind of decide like what's more important right now, right? The guitar or the bass, or and with these guys you don't have to, right? It was just such a treat to share the stage with them. And we turned up the theatricality. We had it almost like an opera show where, Cody embodies Black Star and I embody one of the Dragon Riders. We kind of like duke it out in a couple of the songs. And it was really fun to have these costumes on stage and ham it up and to like embrace like, the joy of prog rock. Cause like there were 3 dudes with capes on stage, it's like Rick Wakeman type stuff. And that's what we've always wanted to do, is like embrace that fun. And again, like you can't wear a cape if you're playing blues rock on stage, but if you're playing progressive rock that's about dragons in outer space, it all of a sudden becomes okay. And there's like this fun and this joy about it. And we bought this terrible inflatable dragon costume for our guitar tech Austin. And so through the looking glass, it's an epic dragon riding ballad. And during that song, like in the second chorus, like he came out in the dragon suit, and Joel, like the audience lost it every night. Like our agents and our management were like, this is too cheesy. Don't do it. It's too stupid. But every time he did it, everyone just cheered so loud. It was amazing. And then during the bridge of that song, as a joke, like we'd like fight. Like I fought with like my guitar as I'm playing it with him, and we slay him, and like he drags himself off the stage, and then like in 30 seconds gets out of the costume, gets the next guitar ready for the next song. Like he's a true professional. I just love Austin so much. And like every time footage comes up of it, it makes me laugh. And I think that's what you have to do. Like, cause like there's no way anyone's actually making money doing this. So you have to do what you want to do and make the art that you want to make. And it's like, I want to laugh when I think about the band, and like that, and that did it. And that, made me actually see, we finally got to put the show on that we've always wanted to see, and every time I watch those videos, I'm seeing what I've had in my head this whole time, just as the music is the music I've heard in my head the whole time. And that's what we're supposed to do, right? Is bring out the art that you want to see in the world that you might be missing out on. So
You brought childlike wonder back to the stage.
yeah, it was, yeah, exactly. It was really fun, and the promoters all loved it. And a lot of the people who are booking these theaters are big nerds, because you have to be a big nerd to be in the performing arts. And they were, like, so a lot of them were really happy to see that kind of music, happening again. So
We've made it to the final handful of questions. When
all
you
right.
look back on your life and career, what are you most proud of?
That's a great question. I would definitely say that, that recent tour I'm most proud of. I'm most proud of this new record, Apocalypse. I'm unbelievably proud that, a few years ago we met Terry Brown, the guy who produced the first 10 Rush records. And, we've become friends with him, and we've worked with him on a number of projects, either with Crownlands or with David Barrett, or like we've actually got a record coming out later this year, an instrumental album that Terry produced and mixed. I engineered it. One of my most proud things is becoming like a collaborator with Terry as a producer, where I've produced a number of records this year. Like last year, I produced the third Brass Camel album, which just came out. Joel, if you haven't checked that out, check it. You're gonna love it. I think they're the best band in Canada. They're unbelievable. And Terry mixed that record and I produced it. And I'm so proud of that album. I think Terry's going to be producing this Dreamland album that I mentioned as well. Another thing I'm so proud of, one of the, other biggest things I'm proud of is the fact that I've actually been able to meet Getty and Alex as not maybe not as peers, but like you like to say like this is a very Canadian statement. You want to meet your heroes on the ice, right? And so, if you grew up worshiping Wayne Gretzky, the dream is not to meet him as a fan in line. You want to meet him as an on the ice, right? Either playing with him or against him. And that's why it was so cool to the first time we met Alex was playing on stage together at Massey Hall. It was like, wow, this is that's unbelievable. But not just that, but being able to become friends with them, where, as I said, right, to be able to be in a position that I can actually help them achieve their vision as well, right? Like on this recent tour where, like being able to help them with the Morning Star MIDI controller, like that's, a dream too, But yeah, those are some, big things I'm proud of. I'm proud of the fact that like somehow, we've scraped by and paid most of our life expenses with music over the last few years. That's a huge accomplishment, avoiding real life responsibility.
And now, when you look back on your life and career, what are you most grateful for?
The fact I'm still doing it, the fact that we're actually still carrying on, despite like everything, that we've been through as a band. Because it's not easy, man. It's not easy playing this kind of music and keeping it going and keeping it fresh every year. So I'm very grateful that we're still doing it.
Now, if you could sit down next to your 10-year-old self and you could whisper words of advice, taking everything you've learned since 10 years old, all the lessons and mentorship and experiences, the highs and lows, successes and failures, what do you whisper to cute little Kevin there, doesn't have his beard yet, to help guide him through this human experience?
I tell them to invest in Bitcoin when you have the chance in high school, or something to make it easier because it's like there's something there's like a question that Cody and I ask each other a lot where it's like if you had $1 million, if you won the lottery tomorrow, what would you do? And Cody and I agree we'd be doing the same thing. I wouldn't be doing anything differently. Like if money was no object, I would be doing everything I'm doing. I'd just be doing it to a higher level because the only thing that separates artists that wish they could have done it, or like like or and then people who are doing it, it's just a question of dedication to the lifestyle of willing to be on the road for that long or being able to tour. But now even more so, it's also its level of can you afford to lose money by touring, right? Because I'm lucky that Ontario headliner we came out with a few $1,000s as a profit from that, right? That's one of the first tours we've done that actually saw a profit. Most tours lose money, and if money was no object, yeah, like we'd just be touring Europe for the sake of it because it's fun. Same thing. I'd be touring America because it's fun, because I want to go and play shows. It's just, one of those heartbreaking things that like all it takes is 2 or 3 tours and then you're bankrupt again, right? Like right before we signed to Universal, I think we had like $20,000 in debt. Like we were in $20,000 in overdraft on our corporate account at TD, right? Because like that was how your line of credit was built. It's just built as a negative balance. And we were like, yikes, do we have to declare bankruptcy? And then we got signed to Universal and we got bailed out, right? Where it's like, that Jack White tour was amazing, but like we lost all that money doing it. So it's like, that's what I would tell my younger self is like, you want to do the silly thing of playing music, like invest in Bitcoin so you can afford to do it and not have to worry about real life as much because that's the only thing that kind of keeps me from being truly joyful in every day is just that threat of, do you want to go on tour? You're going to have to declare bankruptcy. That's the only that's the only thing that holds me back from living in perpetual joy, I think, dude.
Is there anything you'd like to say to the fans that have supported you and the band over the last 11 years?
Nothing but, again, gratitude and, just thank you. Thank you for supporting us and letting us do our thing and, and push through different genres of music that we've wanted to explore. And, thanks for keeping progressive rock alive by buying our records and coming to our shows and wearing our t-shirts. And hopefully we don't let you down with this new album. And hopefully the one that comes out after is even better, because even though Apocalypse has just come out, we are close to finishing the writing process for this new record, and it's sounding amazing. I'm really excited about this one that's following it. So stay tuned. It's going to be good.
As we wrap up, I just want to take a moment to acknowledge you for your lifelong pursuit of mastery as a multi-instrumentalist, as a songwriter. I commend you for having a big vision for your life, for setting these goals, working towards them on a daily basis. You've shown the rest of us what's possible if we also commit to living out our dreams. I want to thank you for putting out great music that's become the soundtrack to the lives of people from around the world. And last but not least, I want to thank you for this interview, sitting down with me for the last 2+ hours, answering all my ridiculous Crownlands questions here. So, Kevin, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Dude, oh, thank you, man. It's been such a great time talking to you, and thanks for all of the digging that you've done. You put on a heck of an interview, dude, and thanks for your support, man.
You're very welcome. Thank you for the kind words. So, to the Kevin Comeau fans, to the Crownland fans, to the podcast fans, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Awesome. Thanks, dude.
If you've enjoyed today's episode, please take a moment to subscribe, like, comment, and share. Who would you like me to feature next for a 2-hour deep dive interview? You can let me know in the comments. You can also send me an email at joelmartinmastery@gmail.com, or you can reach out to me on all social media platforms at joelmartinmastery. So I am done. I am complete. I approve this message, and I'll see you on the next episode.